Hello, this is Bad Tempered Badger here, and I'm here today with Alpha 4 to discuss Brexit. Now,
Hello.
My view on Brexit is I voted to leave, and that might make me a little unpopular with some of the people viewing this. It might also make me a bit more popular with some of them. I voted to leave, and I still support leaving. I didn't vote to leave for a lot of the reasons that were put up on the side of buses. The whole immigrants bad, don't immigrants. I have certain issues with some aspects of that, but I'm not against immigration as a concept. But this isn't really about my views on it. This is about the concept of it as a whole from an outside perspective. So, Mr. Alpha 4, what do you think of this whole situation?
Weirdly, my perspective on it comes from two personal points of view, which is I live in a town that was actually founded by Scottish settlers. So when I heard about how they're trying to put up, I don't even know what to call it, hard borders with Scotland with the Brexit, I thought it was actually a tragedy. And then from another perspective, my ancestry goes back to Spain and to France. And to hear the EU basically get the upper hand on Britain just seems stupid. I don't understand what you guys are trying to do. I think even Nigel Farage had some good points during the negotiations. And I thought Theresa May sounded like a joke. It was bad. Watching that live coverage, I was like, wow, I'm glad I'm an American. Like, it looked bad, and I've never had that thought before watching it. I always look at the House of Commons, and I'm like, hey, it's cool that they actually questioned the Prime Minister directly. I wish we did that to the President. But here, it was like, oh, I'm glad we don't, because our current President would look like an ass. So, yeah.
I don't think Theresa May is very popular in general. She's certainly not popular with me. I didn't like her before this whole thing, for some of the things she did as Home Secretary before becoming Prime Minister. She was rather pushy towards restriction of freedom of expression and also internet regulations that affect its functionality. And she has that in common with the EU.
Yeah, but to me, I mean, and again, I'm talking from the American perspective, and I believe in freedom of speech, and I believe in all those kind of freedoms that Europe has only recently embraced. But, and I don't mean that in a condescending kind of way, but the way that Germany has kind of taken a stranglehold, and the way that the EU has taken a stranglehold on British common law, to me seems like a tragedy. I don't understand how you all can possibly live in a world where you don't have religious freedom, where you can't say what you want about certain religions, where a type of blasphemy law will come into effect. I don't understand how you're going to live in a world where there's regulation on YouTube, regulation on the internet, regulation on every aspect of life, but yet you are going to be subject to EU rule without any representation. The Americans had our own little battle with that and kind of like dipped tea into the ocean and said,
Still haven't forgiven you for that tea business.
Yeah, we kind of said F you to you guys, and we kind of said bye-bye Britain. And now you guys are the ones who are basically submitting to the authority of an invisible king. You're practically turning the EU into a god. And for what reason? I don't understand.
I'm not in support of it. My personal view on things at the moment is the best option would be to leave with no deal with the EU.
I agree. I think that's correct. But again, I'm coming from a very limited perspective. Mm-hmm. I'm just looking at it from the outside, and I'm like, oh, you guys are getting screwed.
Mm-hmm. I'm of the opinion that, yes, a lot of the people saying it wouldn't be that great for the economy of the UK to leave the EU with no deal, and it wouldn't be that great for the economy of the EU either. However, I'm of the opinion that the EU has shown itself to be a somewhat fascistic state, or attempt to create a fascistic superstate, particularly recently with the whole EU army business. And I don't want to be part of it. I don't want my country to be part of it.
You know, it's weird that you bring up the EU army. Back when the EU was first announced, in America, we had two reactions. We had the liberal reaction, which was, all right, finally we're going to have this one world government. It's going to be great. And then you had the conspiratorial religious reaction from fundamentalists, and they viewed it as like, oh, here comes the chips, here comes the 666, here comes all this kind of prophecy stuff that's has to do with, there's like really weird evangelical prophecy concerning the EU and concerning I can't think of it right now, the United Nations.
Yep.
And concerning the United Nations, where like, oh, it's going to become one world power and it's going to take away the rights of people. Mm-hmm. And the whole argument for the EU was that no, it will protect the rights. And me personally, I supported the EU being a concept. I think it's backwards that so many nations haven't done what America has done, which is unite into one stronger nation. Like, I think that's the right way to go. But then you guys, and I'm saying you guys because you're still technically part of the EU. I mean, sort of.
For now.
You then become the exact monster you guys said you wouldn't become. You become authoritative. You become tyrannical. You're censoring people. What is the process of that happening? I mean, is it because of the influx of Islam? Is it financial gain? Is it because the United States has just been wagging our what over you for so long and you're just tired of seeing it? Like, what exactly is the reaction for this authoritative and, quite frankly, economically suicidal push?
I do not know. I do know that the current leadership of the EU, a few people in particular, have made statements that they are quite opposed to what they refer to as populism. And I've read into that to mean that they oppose being subject to the will of the people. I don't know if that's an entirely accurate statement or whether that's a subconscious thing for them, or whether it's a thing for them at all, but it's what their actions show to me.
You self-identify sometimes as an SJW, so I mean, that is the problem with what's happening in the EU from a United States perspective, is that you have a bunch of people who are claiming that all the standards that have existed before are no longer relevant, and you have from an American perspective, Europe is falling apart. And it's very weird because, like I said, I actually support the EU. I was actually, on a personal level, anti-Brexit. And I was, honestly, I wanted Scotland to break free from the United Kingdom. Those are all things that, from a outside perspective, I was hoping for. None of those things happened. Everything went the opposite way. Don't count on me on gambling. If you're ever in a place where you got to make bets, don't go with my opinion. But the EU seems to be counterproductive. I mean, am I wrong? Like, explain it to me. Explain to me what I'm not getting as an American, if you would.
Well, I think there's just a level of tension between EU countries that is not as apparent from an outside perspective. If you look at it from outside as a united thing, there's a lot of internal aspects that aren't apparent. For example, Britain and France have historically not got on very well. Germany, this is my layman's perspective. I'm not an expert in this by any means. Germany and Greece are not friends at all at the moment because Greece is in an economic shambles, and Germany's ended up paying for it because of the EU. So there's a lot of internal tension that the leadership of the EU, I think, is trying to conceal from their outside trading partners.
Is the EU as powerful as it seems from the United States perspective? Or is it really just Britain that's the powerhouse there? Or
Brit-
is Germany truly the person in control?
Britain's definitely not the powerhouse of the EU in terms of political influence. The EU, I'd say, is quite a powerful entity politically, but has no way to apply that. Well, in theory it is, but it has no way in practice to actually apply that power because it is so fractured. It has no actual influence over much of the rest of the world as a united bloc because it isn't one. It just pretends to be.
I'm going to be honest with you. If you talk to the United States, if you talk to an average American, I can tell you what countries they can name in the EU. They can name Britain. They can name Spain. Yeah. They can name Germany, and they can name France. And you get past those four countries, nobody knows any other countries even exist. That's just the truth. You say Belgium, and they'll flip their lid. You know what I mean? Like they're like, "What? What's that?" Like so
also Belgium,
Americans, yeah, like Americans have no idea, like anything. Like I think, what is it? Chechnya and Slovenia and all these countries, they're almost mythical to an American's mind.
Have they ever heard of Estonia?
Yeah, well, thanks to that stupid movie we have. But the thing that I'm asking you though is that you live in a situation. What could you explain to like someone who's going to watch this video because I'm on it? Americans on it. What could you explain to us that we just don't understand? Because, look, I'm fascinated by the fact that you guys have a parliament system instead of a Congress and a Senate and a senatorial system. Like, to us, that's entertaining all on its own. So, what can you explain to someone who might be watching this video because I'm on it? What do they need to know? What don't they get about the sufferings and the pain of being in the EU that doesn't come across to us?
Well, for a start, there's the Islam thing. There's a quite massive divide on thinking on that issue. There is the side I'm kind of on, which is a somewhat anti-religious side in general, but also specifically with regards to Islam, views it as a dangerous, violent ideology. And I am aware that most followers of Islam are not that. They're just people who want to live and carry on and move to somewhere that it will be good for them to live in. However, there is a cultural difference. Even in the more mild cases, there is a cultural difference between how people expect where they're going to be and how it is. And in the more extreme cases, that comes out in terms of violence and, the whole rape gang thing. That's an ongoing thing all over Europe. There's one side of the discussion which is very reluctant to put the title Islam anywhere near it. They will describe the perpetrators of these violent and disgusting acts as Asian, in quotes. Which is technically accurate in some ways, but doesn't describe the situation in any useful way.
As someone who's engaged as someone who's Chinese, I find that slightly offensive, honestly. But okay.
There's a page that I'm following called UK Police Reports or something like that. It's almost always described as a group of Asian men did this thing, and everyone knows what it means, but no one says it.
Well, okay, so from your perspective, then, is the problem that's engulfing the EU is it simply this immigration problem, and then putting you on the side of the conservatives, or is it this new multicultural, cultural revolution, cultural change thing that's happening in Europe that's the problem? What to you is the true catalyst of the conflict?
Well, I'd say the true catalyst of Brexit has been coming for decades. It's been a simmering undercurrent of discontent among a gradually increasing portion of the UK populace. It's been when the EU was first conceived, there were sort of fringe groups saying, "I don't think this is a good idea. I don't think we should join it." And then, as the EU regulations started to come in and became more and more prevalent and more imposed over people who felt they had no influence on them and no way out of them, that simmering undercurrent of discontent got bigger. And there have been people for decades now asking for a referendum on leaving the EU. And I personally suspect that David Cameron at the time thought he would win a referendum on the side of remaining. So put it out as a way of settling it and not having to hear about it anymore. And saying, right, we'll have a binding EU referendum that the majority will vote Remain, and we won't have to talk about it again. And he and the government, I don't think, were at all prepared for the result they got, and found themselves right in the shit when they did it.
Well, let me say this, though. Okay, so in the United States, we actually had our own version of this at the beginning. We actually had a different government before we had our current government. Mm-hmm. And we tried doing it where all the states were equal. And to be honest with you, it just doesn't work. You got to have a federal system. You got to have a national government that's above the state government. Otherwise, there's no chain of command. Has the EU or even Britain, would you, as someone who is an Englishman, is that okay for you to say?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay. There's someone who is an Englishman. How would you be willing to submit to a higher power of, let's say, an EU government, federal government, much like the United States has, where you'd have a president and they would make laws that were of greater authority than your state level laws?
EU, no.
Why not?
Because I'm against over-centralized authority in that way. I think there's a level where centralized authority is good, and there's a level where it's too big and it's beyond usefulness. And I think the EU is at that stage. And before you come back on that, there is a level of that kind of centralization that I am okay with, or more okay with, which is the UK government separate to the EU. It has centralized authority in the form of Parliament, with MPs of each area that are voted in by their constituents and go there to represent them, supposedly. Lower than that, there are county councils. Each county in the UK has its own local government council, and within that, each city has its own local government council. I'm fine with that, but I think beyond that, it starts to get too big and bloated and can't do anything.
Well, let me ask you about that, though. Okay, so how do you feel? I mean, because you're talking about bloat, and in the United States, we think a bloat is actually a good thing because it prevents bad laws from being passed. It's what we call gridlock. Mm-hmm. For you, do you think your opinion of a centralized government being mostly negative, though with some minor benefits, mm-hmm. or even some good benefits, do you think that represents the majority of the view in Britain, or do you think that most people in the UK disagree with you? Like, where do you think it falls?
I don't think
politically speaking.
Yeah, I don't think my position is a majority view in that regard. I think that a lot of people would be willing to have something. Well, just less than 50% of people voted to remain in the EU. So they would be fine with that level of centralised government. And I think a lot of the people who voted to leave would be fine with some aspect of it, but not as it currently presents itself.
Do you feel that maybe the EU possible power struggle could lead to a new type of monarchy? Where, in other words, instead of it being the queen or the king of this country or that country, like it was, let's say, in the Middle Ages, where the where the monarchs ruled. Now you have a sort of political monarchy where the people like you no longer have a voice. Is that your fear, or is your fear something else?
Well, my fear with the EU is that I view it as a large, unaccountable government of pretty much unelected officials.
Hence, I use the term monarchy.
Yeah, as I wouldn't necessarily put monarchy on it because it's not hereditary. They're voted in by other bureaucrats.
So a tyranny.
Sort of, yeah. That's how I'm looking at it, because I can vote for an MEP. I can at the moment. I won't be able to next year, assuming that the leaving is not delayed. That MEP has very little influence, and the actual council, the actual people in charge of the EU, are entirely unaccountable to me.
So is it a problem of accountability, or is it a problem of the financial future of Britain, from your point of view?
Well, I've according to a lot of people, voted quite disastrously for the financial future of Britain. And
So it's authority.
It's authority, yeah. It's sovereignty and it's authority. I'm willing for my country to do badly financially for a while if it'll mean we avoid a worse state of affairs later.
So it's give me liberty or death. I mean, you're basically becoming the United States. That's what you're saying.
Sort of. I am on the side of liberty. I'm on the side of personal choice and personal freedom.
But you brought up something earlier.
Mm-hmm.
Which is that there's a religious aspect to this, and in a way, you could view it as that invaders are coming in to change your culture.
Mm-hmm.
So, me personally, I don't have a problem with Islam like that. I don't view it that way. But in the United States, we have this kind of multicultural melting pot. In Europe, everything that I hear from them is that when I watch whether YouTube or even the BBC, is that there is a fear of multiculturalism. There is a fear of the culture changing. Are you worried about your culture, or are you worried about your nation?
A bit of both. I'm not so worried about it from a religious perspective, because, well, obviously atheist. But I am worried about it from a cultural perspective in regard to Britain has a quite specific and well-established culture in certain areas and certain values, which the
Just call them immigrants.
Which immigrants from particularly Islamic countries don't share. Some of them do. That's why they want to come here. Some of the immigrants are, well, let me put it this way: people who want to live in the UK because of the UK's established values, I welcome them fully. Someone who wants to come here for what this place is, I'm fully in support of them. Someone who wants to come here and establish it as another state of their own, another outpost of their own nation, I'm against.
We have a joke here where I live, 'cause I'm from Texas, which is people in California move here all the time to get away from California politics. Mm-hmm. But then as soon as they come to Texas, they vote like they're still in California. And they're bringing over their politics here, which is exactly what they're trying to get away from. So I feel what you're saying, though, to a much lesser extent.
Yeah.
But do you feel that there is a way for your government or even your culture to allay your fears? For instance, what about cultural reappropriation, or that's the wrong word, cultural re-education, like in China? And this is a very controversial thing. I'm not trying to put you into a boiling pot of water here. But in China, they're actually forcing they're actually forcing the Muslims that are farther outside of the culture, not the mainstream Muslims, but those of smaller sects, to actually go through a re-education program where they have to learn Chinese, where they have to learn the Chinese culture. Now, from my perspective, that's a violation of human rights. I'm not trying to accuse you of wanting something like that, but I'm saying, is that something that you want? I'm asking you, is that what you would want to do? Would you want them to become British first? Or would you want British Britain and them to adapt together. What would you prefer?
I wouldn't want that. No, I like I said, I'm for personal liberty and personal choice. That includes choice of religion and culture. But
what about when their culture clashes with?
I think in that instance, the culture of the country they're in should take precedence in terms of the laws and in terms of let's say someone coming to a country where they have an aspect of their culture that conflicts with the culture that they're visiting or that they want to live within. What would be a good example of that?
I don't know. There's a bunch of migrants, about 1,000 strong, come from Mexico and then the United States from Central America.
All right, how about this? Polish immigrants to the UK.
Okay.
There is a big thing in Poland where fishermen go out to rivers and fish for food. UK fishermen don't do that. UK fishermen, river fishermen, generally throw the fish back, still alive, after catching them, as they're fishing for sport, and they're fishing for the thrill of fishing. Polish fishermen comment, I've been reading fishing forums about this, Polish fishermen will comment that the size of the fish they find in England they're vastly bigger than the ones they catch in Poland. It's because they've already killed and eaten all the big ones. So, and there's a big thing between the Polish and British way of looking at this. There's a big conflict in that area, and I would say, if you're coming to England, you should respect the English and British perspective on that and not kill and eat all the fish. Also, you have to have a license to go river fishing in England, which most of these immigrants do not.
Let me give you a different analogy for you to examine, because that one, I'll be honest with you, didn't really go anywhere. Okay, so I live in a border town.
Yeah.
And so I have people from Mexico that come in and become Texan or become American.
Yep.
And they have to change the way they do things, so we don't want to they drive. I have a friend who's from China, and she and her friends, and like there's a whole community because there's a whole exchange program happening here where Chinese people come here for a year and they live here as an exchange program. And when they do that, most of them just don't adapt. Most of them end up renting out an entire apartment complex, and it becomes temporarily a mini China, where all they do is they speak Chinese and they help each other and they drive each other to places and they do things the Chinese way. They eat the Chinese way, which in American culture is very rude. They smack their lips. They eat with the bowl up here.
Yep.
They burp and they belch, and to them, that means the food is good. Okay, that is a compliment. If you're eating the bowl like this and you go, Barr! That means you like the food. But in America, we have English customs.
Yeah,
that's incredibly rude. So what ends up happening is, like, for instance, when I talk to my friends who are part of this community and we go out to eat, I end up having to be the etiquette police, and I'm like, no, you gotta stand up here and you put your hands here and you don't put your elbows on the table. You gotta chew with your mouth closed. And they're like, why would we want to do that? And it's like, it's just the way things are. Yeah. And you can't have your kid run around talking to people or mixing all the drinks. Like, you got to keep the kid controlled. And they're like, why would we want to do that? And it's like, because here you do those kind of things. So, like, to me, what you're saying to me is that because the culture clash is so strong, you can't just simply instruct. Is that your fear, or is there something more to it, or something less?
Well, with that analogy, if it's just a case of manners, I don't think it's such a big issue. It's annoying, but it's not life-threatening in most cases. With my fishing analogy, once or twice it could be life-threatening.
Oh, you're going to go back to that fishing analogy.
I am.
Yeah, it is.
Just because people have come to blows over it.
Okay.
And the other thing with the culture analogy in terms of eating, like I said, I don't think it's quite such an issue in terms of violence, and it's also, that's just how people from different countries interact. And there's fun to be had there. Just poking fun at other cultures. Like, well, they might be looking at it from the perspective of, well, how do we know that you're enjoying the food if you don't make any noise? And that's a fun thing to have a chat about. But if your culture,
how do you answer the question? I'm going to stop you there because it's kind of running low on time for me. How do you answer the question though that you, by even objecting to this, by even bringing this topic up, are racist and a bigot? Because that is the accusation that gets thrown at people who say exactly what you just said.
Mm-hmm. Well, one, culture isn't race. Someone could be born in China as from English parents and look English, but be born in China and raised in Chinese customs. They are culturally Chinese, but genetically and visually Western. Mm-hmm. Their culture is Chinese.
China's answer to that is that you're not Chinese. That's how China handles that problem, just to be clear.
Nah,
but I understand what you're saying. In America, you'd be American no matter where you're from. Right?
Yeah. Culture isn't race, and not just culture not being race. What was the other thing you said, sir?
Mannerisms and all that.
Yeah, that's not race. And it's a choice how you act. It is not bigoted to say. It's not bigoted to say, I don't like how this person acts. It becomes bigoted to say, and racist to say, I don't like what this person is. And if that person is, whole group,
their argument about just to be clear, I'm not
in
America. I'm not making this argument. I'm just simply saying their argument is that you are blanketing a whole group of people. You're not just saying this one Muslim person's a jerk. You're saying this whole group has been increasing the crime rate across Europe. And to them, that is a racist statement. And you can see if you ignore the word race and take race to mean group, you can see where they're coming from when they say that. I mean, even as someone who disagrees with them, I can see what they're saying, and you can too. You're not foolish. You know what you're.
Oh, I know what they're saying. I know what they're saying, absolutely. But calling it racist is inaccurate. Calling it painting with too broad a brush might be accurate, but I'm not saying that this entire group is causing this. I'm saying individuals within this entire group are choosing to commit acts which cause this negative perception, and their choice mars this entire group and paints them with this broad brush.
Well, let me finish with this, because my channel usually talks religion.
Mm-hmm.
So I just watched a debate where a Christian said to a Muslim, why does the Quran say Allah prays to? Why does the Quran say that Allah prays for the Prophet? And the Muslim said, why do you keep saying it says it prays to? Now, the guy said pray for, but the Muslim apologist was saying, see, you're saying he prays to. Mm-hmm. And he's like, no, that's not what I said. I asked, who is he praying to if he's praying for someone? That's what the apologist asked.
Yeah.
But because the two cultures refused to see the other one's point of view, one side only heard the word praying to, the other side only heard praying for.
Yeah.
And even though they were reading the exact same paper or the exact same verse, they couldn't communicate with each other even on a linguistic level. Mm-hmm. So how do you know, and how are you sure that you aren't guilty of the same bias when it comes to looking at this problem?
I'm not sure. I don't think there are any easy answers to this issue. But I think there's much better ways of trying to deal with it than the way it is currently being dealt with. I think it's impossible to please everyone, and I think it's impossible for everyone to live harmoniously with everyone else all the time. I think in some cases it is necessary to paint with a broad brush in order for demographics to get on. And yes, that will adversely affect individuals within those demographics. But
let me
sometimes
ask
that's
you one last
necessary.
question right here, and this I'll have to stop here.
Yeah.
Let me ask you one last question, which is, are you scared or are you nervous about just this conversation maybe blocking you in the UK with the current laws
Yes.
as it stands?
Yes. I think it might be entirely possible that if some of the things that I want to say about certain individuals within a group could be taken to apply to that whole group, and given the way things have been going with some people, I could end up in prison. So
That's a very serious statement.
I am careful in the way I word things for that reason.
Do you feel that's a curtailing of your freedom, or do you feel that that's justifiable?
No, I don't think it's justifiable. I think anyone should be able to say anything about anyone else within certain restrictions, which are way less than the restrictions currently going on in the EU and the UK. Well, thank you for coming on discussing this heated issue with me, Mr. Alpha 4.
Well, thank you. Thank you for educating me.
Thanks for watching, everyone. That was Bad Temper Badger and Alpha 4 discussing Brexit from an outside perspective. Hopefully, it doesn't get me right in the shit. Thanks for watching,
Talk to you all
everyone.
later.